Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're here for a special episode, a Know Your Foe episode, looking at the Bengals draft. Joining us is Mike Santagata. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ken?
Always a pleasure to talk football with you, Mike, and longtime Bengals fan, on regularly, at least once per year, to talk Bengals with us, oftentimes about some other move or an off-season program on the Cincinnati Bengals. But appreciate you making time for this on a Thursday afternoon, and tell us about the draft. And let's start with kind of a polarizing first pick at number 17 overall with Shemar Stewart.
Yeah, it's it's a high potential pick. I think the pros are there's just not a lot of humans like him. His size, strength, and explosive get off ability. You can see why a team falls in love, and that is exactly the Bengals type. Not much production, very little production in college. Some of that, I think, can be attributed to the scheme. He plays so tight to the offensive line, either in a 4-eye inside the tackle or like a heavy 5-tech right outside the tackle, sometimes inside the tight end. You don't see him very often in like a wide 9 where he really gets to use that get off and fire off the ball. But also a lot of that production stuff gets to go back to him in both the run and pass game. I think he doesn't have good eyes, right? He lets things run by him. Even he beats the block, does everything coaching point. Let's go make a tackle. Let's go make the stop. Let's keep our eyes on the ball carrier and make that stop. And then when it comes to pass rush, he's got issues where it's a little disjointed. I think his hips are constantly pointed forward to get upfield rather than pointed to the quarterback to work to the quarterback. So he has to spend time kind of making a move, wasting time going forward, and then flipping his hips. By the time you do that, these offensive linemen are good. They recover. They get back in position, and even if you had them beat, you no longer do. I think hands-wise also just a lot of issues with placement, timing, etc. He would have had more production despite the scheme if he was a more refined player. And I think that's really what it is. You're taking the biggest ball of clay in the draft possibly and just seeing if you can mold him into being a great player. Where it stands right now, I think the one issue that Bengals fans and everybody that should look at this should have, in my opinion, is that was Myles Murphy 2 years ago. This is almost the exact same conversation that I had repeatedly about Myles Murphy, except the production's worse and he's big. It's almost a more extreme version somehow where he's bigger and faster, but the production's actually worse. He's less refined than Murphy coming out. And Murphy, 0 sacks last year, led second on the team in pressures, low bar. I mean, there's not a lot of good pass rushers on this defense. So can either one of those guys start producing is a question. And does Stewart say something about Murphy? And if it does, how do you know that this isn't going to go down the same road?
A great point. And, in terms of his college production, it's not really just the pass rush. There were a lot of problems with missing tackles with Stewart. That was one of the things I didn't like. It didn't have, surprisingly, did not have a lot of defensive wins. So I look at stops to missed tackles for defensive linemen. He's got a 28-18 career ratio. It's about as bad as anybody who's draftable in this class.
I think some of that goes to the eyes, just doesn't make the play. And then some of that also, like you're saying, missed tackles. Yeah, he just leaves his feet. He just constantly leaves his feet. And the Al Golden defensive coordinator said he misses some of those tackles because he gets in positions other guys don't. It's like, yeah, that's some of them. Some of them he makes a play that's like alien type of move to get back into the backfield. Then he just misses the tackle. And sometimes he just left his feet for no reason and missed the tackle, or he overran the guy and missed the tackle. So I think he just needs to be a little more under control to try to make some more stops because his production issue also stems in the run game too. It's not just a pass rush issue with him in terms of production. I think PFF graded him really highly as a run defender. And then you also look, he's missed a bunch of tackles and he doesn't actually make plays. He's just beating the block for the most part. He's not actually making the play.
Well, and a lot of times that it's defensive line missed tackles. They're bad, but they can be misses where they turn the quarterback, 135 degrees and create a very disadvantageous situation. Same thing with bifurcating the backfield and missing the running back. You often create a situation where somebody else makes a play after you. I've always wanted a better grading system for missed tackles that would get at that. And I would not surprise me if Shemar Stewart would come out looking pretty good if you looked at it that way.
Yeah, creating chaos, not making the play, but you blew up the front side of the run, so the running back has to run in to help.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the second pick, Demetrius Knight.
Well, I did not like this linebacker class after the first two guys, and the Bengals, of course, took two linebackers with their first four picks.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Knight in comparison to a lot of these guys. My main issue was, and I thought he was even older because the Beast, I believe, had him at like 25, and he's going to turn 26 this year. It's 24, going to turn 25 this year. But still, that's an old player. That is, and he only became good in the last year or two. So you have a lot of questions about, is this just a man playing college boys? Is that
Yes.
why he looks good? I think he's athletic. I think like straight line speed, athletic. You can see the closing speed and how it looks on film. And I think GPS monitoring had him as one of the fastest linebackers. I don't know about his hips. I think his hips are a little tight. And I think there's just a little bit of, he's a bit refined. Like I think he takes on blocks well. I think he does a good job of trying to make plays in the run game. I think he goes under block sometimes, and that usually you take yourself out of that play. But I think there's just a little bit of an eye thing with him too, where sometimes the eye candy gets him. And then also a few times on scramble drills, which is huge in the NFL now, instead of plastering a guy, he just keeps gaining depth and gaining width with the quarterback, which is great, except the guy runs underneath him and makes the catch, where you should probably just match that guy. And then these negatives kind of get magnified in my brain because this guy's older. This guy is like the same age as Jamar Chase. And how much better do I think Jamar Chase is going to be next year than he was last year? Maybe Jamar Chase just reached his potential and Knight hasn't, but that's where I kind of lean into like the age. The only thing is both aesthetics, because he wears a loose, untucked shirt a lot of times, and how he plays reminds me of Jermaine Pratt, who's probably off the team. So it's kind of funny. This is like a 1-to-1 replacement in my head where for the straight line fast, at least in Pratt's prime, not anymore really. I don't know what happened to his speed. A little bit tight hipped, and it seems like he needs a little bit of work mentally, eyes, and just refinement. It feels very Jermaine Pratt to me. And he forced 2 fumbles in one game. That's something Pratt loved doing. So I don't know. Maybe it's just the loose, untucked shirt and everything. But I was kind of looking at it. I was like, yeah, they just must have seen Jermaine Pratt and this guy and went like, yeah, we got to have him. Pratt's gone.
Really good coverage linebacker, at least metric wise, 5.1 yards per target and a 65.1 opposition passer rating this last year. Didn't allow any plays over 16 yards. And that's hard to do as an inside linebacker because oftentimes there'll be some screen pass which gets away from you for a substantial gain. I mean, longer than 16 yards anyway. It's a good season, at least from that perspective. What did you think about it? What he gives them Bengals in terms of coverage ability? And, one thing I wasn't real clear on, I don't seem to have a note on, is what he understands about what's going on behind him, which a young linebacker typically is not going to know. But Demetrius Knight had a little longer in college to figure it out. What did you think about that?
I think when he has a defined role, he's very good in coverage, match-wise, man coverage, and the zone works too. A lot of times, it's just a little bit of like I had the issue with the scramble drill, but I did think his coverage was pretty good. He was one of my favorite of the linebackers I didn't like. Where like I didn't really like any of these guys as more than like an early day 3 type of guy, but he was up there. And if he was 21 or 22, I would have really liked him. It's just seeing how old he is. I think in terms of knowing what's behind him, there were a couple plays that he ends up in the same position as a safety that's behind him. And I wonder, is that, to me, it looked like it was on him more than it was on the safety, just not understanding his role within the concept. He's a former quarterback that turned linebacker. So even though he's older, I think you can buy a little bit of he's a little bit raw at the position. All in all, though, to me, this felt like what should have been a 3rd round pick. I think he could start. I think he'll be an okay starter. But I think when you're looking at your 2nd round pick, you're hoping for a little bit more than an older prospect that could possibly be a low end starter for you. You're probably looking for a younger prospect that could grow. They felt like they needed to make this pick because they probably didn't have any of the linebackers after him that high for a third round pick, and they knew they needed another linebacker because Al Golden wants to run a 3 linebacker base and 2 linebacker nickel situation. And really, if you think Pratt's gone, there's Oren Burks, and then you're talking about undrafted free agents from last year and Muma Jung Meta or Shaka Hayward. So it was a kind of a reach for a need, in my opinion.
Okay, look, Logan Wilson's still with the Bengals, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of left that one understood. Like Logan Wilson's there. That's one of your linebackers.
Yeah.
And
Phew.
then after that, yeah, right.
Yeah, he's kind of the guy. He's a big Ravens killer, so a guy we've had trouble with. All right, well, let's move on to the third pick. That's Dylan Fairchild, the guard from Georgia.
This one younger, and I think there's more potential here. I liked Ratledge more watching the Georgia offensive line. I thought that Fairchild was just he could play a little high sometimes and let guys bull him backwards, where Ratledge had a stronger anchor. But if you're just looking at Fairchild, it feels raw. It feels like raw power. He's a little bit out of control. He falls down a little bit too much for an offensive lineman, I think, in terms of balance. But there is some movement ability. He's not too stiff. He's not, he's not a bad athlete like Tyler Booker was. He's not as strong as Booker either. And you can see the power, though. You can see plenty of power to uproot guys and move them. So I think I can see how this works. And when you had the worst guard tandem in the league probably last year with post-injury Kappa, and Volson has not progressed in his career, I think it's a low bar to come in and play better. I don't want to say it can't get worse. It can always get worse. But I think it's a low bar in terms of coming in and providing better play than what was there. And there's room for improvement with him being a little bit younger. Wish he got to test. I wonder if he comes in as an average athlete, or does he end up above average? I don't think he would have tested like an elite athlete, but he's interesting. I think they're going to give him the inside track to start, and then you'll immediately have questions if he's not winning that job, like Jackson Carman didn't win that job over Xavier Suafilo. So can he just take that inside track and start over Cordell Volson? And if he does, you're on the right path for him becoming a solid player. I know he's a wrestling champ, but that's good and bad because he also does stop his feet and wrestle guys sometimes. And those are holding penalties in the NFL a lot of times when you just stop your feet and you start wrestling using only your upper body.
Great point. Yeah. And you got to be very aware of where that ball carrier is in particular, because there's places where that holding call will be called. I've got a question that I think relates to all three of the Georgia guys, and that is the Georgia interior offensive line is absolutely fantastic. I mean, as a group, they're fantastic. And I kind of wonder how to divide that out, because they're all great at handing off plays, picking up blitzers that come late, very well coached, clearly, and they did a great job together. And I'm wondering, once that continuity is broken and they're playing with other players at the NFL level, and all of a sudden either more or different is expected of them, is that going to break down some of the value that was very apparent at Georgia? And there are a lot of things I liked about Fairchild, for starting with the fact that he's a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. I always like that whenever I see that in a lineman. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's tough to parse that out when you have that. I think Jared Wilson playing between the two, maybe you give him some credit for being good at passing on both sides. Ratledge was an older prospect, so he should have, passed the processing test. Fairchild passing it, I think that's nice. And the one thing that's nice with the Bengals is he at left guard will be between Ted Karras and Orlando Brown. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't end up next to Amarius Mims, who's a little bit more raw in that aspect of the game. Instead, I think the way it would hopefully line up is you have a veteran next to Mims, between Mims and Karras, and then you'll be able to put the rookie in between Karras and Brown. So I don't know if it'll leave him. I don't know if that, he's kind of got the bumpers on each side for making mistakes with two guys that are pretty smart at playing the position.
All right. Very, very cool. Let's move on. And I guess back to linebacker with that fourth.
If you're looking for a better way to unwind, focus, or even get a good night's sleep, listen up. Let me tell you about Mood, the online cannabis company that's changing the game when it comes to functional gummies. They've crafted a whole line of federally legal THC blends designed to help with everything from stress to sleep to mental clarity and even some spicier needs if you're into that. Now, what makes Mood different? They go beyond just THC. They pair it with herbs and adaptogens to create targeted effects that you won't find in any other dispensary. And every gummy is made with pesticide-free, small farm American cannabis, so you're getting quality that you can trust. I've tried their sleep gummies, and let me tell you, takes about 15 minutes, and I'm out cold, no grogginess, no weird side effects, getting some of the best sleep I've gotten in my life when I take one of these gummies. And if you need a mood boost, there are Epic Euphoria gummies, game changers. And right now, Mood is giving listeners 20% off their first order by using the promo code RAVENS at checkout. So head on over to mood.com, find the perfect gummy for whatever life throws your way, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS to save 20%.
Pick in round 4, Barrett Carter from Clemson.
He looks the part. I think that was the first thing. Is like he looks like a high-end linebacker, just in terms of what he looks like and what he runs on the field. I just don't think it translated to in-game stuff, because if it did, he would have gone higher. I think he's more athletic than he tested. You can see some highlight plays. I mean, there's a famous one where he jumps over a running back trying to block him rather than running through him and keeps moving. It's just too many breakdowns in coverage, and just guys just not picking up guys, or guys running past him. It just feels like his awareness for his coverage isn't there. And that definitely showed up, I believe, in the stat sheet. I don't remember how many big plays were attributed to him, but when you watch him, it's apparent too.
I can give you some statistics. He allowed 8.4 yards per target, which is extremely high. Well, which is high, let's put it that way, and 131.6 opposition passer rating, which was the worst of the inside linebackers. I still really like the guy. I would have liked him in a lower round, probably for the Ravens, but I thought he exactly met a 2-down thumper need that the Ravens would have, and I assume he'll play 2 downs for the Bengals and not 3.
Yeah, I think you're hoping Knight plays 3 downs in this scenario. Like, he becomes the guy in nickel. And then when you're playing a 4-3 base like Golden wants to play, that'll allow Carter to just come on the field for heavy personnel and trying to play that 2-down thumper role.
Yeah, very impressive through the body tackler. Definitely attacks the midsection, drives back. You see a lot of I associate this with some smaller linebackers. I definitely associate it with Patrick Queen as being more of a twister than a through the midsection drive backer. There's been who was the other guy in the division who really had that characteristic? It'll come back to me in a minute, but it's the Chiefs guy, Chanel. Absolutely fantastic through the body tackler. So Leo Chanel. All right. Let's move on to the next pick then. Anything else about Barrett? I don't mean to cut you off.
No, he lays some hits and he drives his feet to move them backwards. So I think a good short yardage player too.
All right, back to the offensive line at pick number 153 with Jalen Rivers of Miami.
Weirdly, one of my favorite picks they made. I think he's versatile, and that showed in Miami, where you would watch games where he plays left tackle, kicks inside the left guard during the game, and there's no drop in play. He's quick processing, quick hands. He's not the most athletic guy, but I think it's around average. It's not bad. In space, maybe you can get on him a little bit, but I like that. To me, he looked like a solid pass protector at both spots. It didn't seem like the game coming quicker to him inside was an issue. I think ideally they're thinking Fairchild starts at left guard. Rivers is a swing tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if Rivers pushes for one of the guard spots. I mean, right now it's penciled in with Fairchild and Lucas Patrick. So to me, neither one of those are extremely high bars. And I ended up giving Rivers about the same grade I gave Fairchild. So I don't think it would be that surprising if he's somehow able to take that job from him. You're talking about 3rd round pick versus a 5th round pick. Fairchild might have the inside track from the coaches, but that's not unattainable. It's not a 1st round pick versus a 6th round pick trying to take that job. So I like this pick a lot. I think it fills a need. it makes it so Cody Ford isn't your swing tackle, which ideally, at least, if he hits the ground running, which is good. That's Cody Ford at tackle happened multiple times last year, so it's a little scary. He hasn't excelled there in his career. He's played better at guard, so we'll see what happens with him. But I like this pick in terms of what they do. They're not asking guys to get out and run too often. They just want somebody who's stout and strong and can move some people.
All right. So Rivers, a guy with almost 35-inch arms. So it's actually a little surprising that he would drop as far as 153. Typically, when I see that kind of arm length, along with a good college pass blocking record, I'd expect that to be a guy who can stay at tackle, just because even if the feet are not perfect, even if the mirror is not ideal, they usually can convert to 12-6 blocking and get the guy south of the pocket when they get beat to the outside by speed. But the other place that this guy could play, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is that I think he would be an ideal right guard in some ways, because that length would play, I think, very well on that side, along with some of the power he brings to the game. And I really don't know, but my guess would be that Fairchild is going to be the more adaptable to the pulling responsibilities of a left guard.
Yeah, I think Fairchild would be more adaptable to pulling. He's a little bit more athletic. Rivers would pull sometimes in Miami, and then also sometimes you would see the running back Martinez have to stop his feet and kind of push him, go, move. So yeah, I think in terms of general fit, I think that the long arms and some of the power might work a little better on the right side. I think in an ideal world, both these guys hit the ground running, and maybe your left and right guards are rookies, and that's not great for the Mims and Rivers combination over there in terms of experience. But if you're able to find two guys that can come in and play offensive line in this draft and play at an okay level, I think that's a pretty good hit. And worst comes to worst, like you said, the 35-inch arms, sticking him at tackle to be the swing tackle backup. Orlando Brown, before the Bengals, was very durable. Now with the Bengals, he's missed time both seasons. And Amarius Mims, I think, if you remember the draft at all last year, missed a ton of time for Georgia. Didn't really miss any time for the Bengals this year. But the swing tackle feels important for this team because they don't have a guy that's on some long Iron Man streak of not missing a snap over multiple seasons.
We can relate to that in Baltimore very directly. So I will say, based on where the Bengals have been in recent years, with very much a patchwork offensive line, particularly before Brown got there, seems like an embarrassment of riches that you guys have now at tackle.
Yeah. Using the first round pick on Mims was great, and then you're finding more guys that can actually come in and play tackle. So part of me wanted them to get an experienced swing tackle because that's what Trent Brown was supposed to be last year before blowing out his patellar tendon. But if it's Rivers, I think that's okay. It's as long as he's able to catch up to NFL speed.
All right. Well, outstanding. And then let's get to the last pick here. Number 193 was Taj Brooks, the running back from Texas Tech.
Honestly, I didn't watch him personally, but reading things, it seems like he fits with Chase Brown a bit in terms of short yardage. I think that when you look at Chase Brown, he can almost do it all, but he is a little undersized and doesn't really drive that thump. So when you get into 3rd and 1 or 4th and inches scenarios, that's where a lot of Bengals plays end up being a little too creative, and they're throwing the ball short of an inches to go marker and getting tackled for a loss. So I think ideally this is a guy you can bring in for some short yardage stuff. They also brought back Pirine for that. I don't know if Zach Moss was supposed to be that. He really wasn't doing that early in the season. So they've got some options for that role now, and it's a role that they didn't need when Mixon was here because he could do it. And now it feels a little bit of a void, hopefully, with him. I think really a 6th round pick, he's probably going to play more special teams than he will on the offense.
All right. Well, that's some great thoughts across the 6 selections, and looking at the team now as a well, looking at the draft capital and how is it expended. Are you more or less in line with how they went about building the 2025 Bengals here in terms of the draft capital, given the defensive, the defense was kind of holding the offense back last year.
Yeah, when you look at the offense, there's not a lot of needs. You have your running back, quarterback, wide receiver spots for the most part. I guess if you wanted to replace Yossi Voss, but that feels like a luxury. And if your third wide receiver, especially when you have Mike Gesicki, maybe you wanted a tight end that can do it all instead of a big slot like Gesicki. But I think you're more so just looking at some, to me, more luxury positions there. I think the big issue is the offensive line didn't really make a huge splash there. I think if they were going to do anything on offense in the draft, it would have been there, and that's what they did with their third round pick. But it makes sense because the defense was really what held them back. So you hope that these defensive picks can come in. Maybe you get some better production and pressure from Stewart, and Knight hits the ground running because he's an older linebacker and is able to come in as a starter. And maybe Carter is able to provide you a role player. Does that take their defense over the top? Probably not unless Stewart really hits the ground running and is like an all-star Will Anderson type edge rusher early on, which I wouldn't predict. So I don't know if it fixes their defense, but it makes sense to allocate more of your resources there when you really only had two positions on offense that you need to fill in both guard spots.
All right. And anything about the UDFAs you really like?
I thought it was interesting that Al Golden's only Notre Dame guy that he brought in was a UDFA and Howard Cross. He had some hype before. I didn't love watching him, but he played nose tackle this year for them at like 285, so that could be the main issue. He's got some movement ability, I think. We'll see if he makes the team. That's the one that's most interesting to me, except maybe the Ohio State center, Seth McLaughlin. I think that's also an interesting one because if he wasn't injured, he gets drafted, I think. So does he find a way to stick around and make the team? The only issue there is they like Ted Karras a lot. They gave him an extension last year. And they like the 6th, I believe, round pick, Matt Lee, quite a bit because he was their 6th offensive lineman last year. And both those guys are kind of center to center only. Maybe one of them could play. I mean, Karras has played guard, but it seems like they just want him to play center for this team. So I don't know how you keep 3 center-only players on the team. So that's where I'm a little more interested in Howard Cross than I am Seth McLaughlin, even if I think McLaughlin was the better player, just because I think there's a clearer path to making the team for him.
Yeah, Ravens have exactly the other option that they only have one guy who can play center and a real huge question mark after that in terms of who it might be. Last question I'll ask you. The drafting of 2 inside linebackers in particular, and Ravens fans undergo a lot of Ravens-centric experiences this year, but it almost looks like the Bengals draft was really addressed at trying to combat some of the things the Ravens do. Feelings on that?
Yeah, you want those guys at the second level flowing against a Ravens rushing attack with all the options, and you just don't want to get stuck where if you play 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, you're stuck and they're still able to read the end man. You only have 2 guys that can flow with that. So they've liked in the past to play 3 linebackers against the Ravens. So making that, putting some more athletic second level players on the field, I think helps. I think my main thought there is just you almost wish, and it's a 4th round pick, but you almost wish you could have found another guy that could maybe have taken a starting job, where I don't think Carter's going to take any starting job. I think at best he's a role player, at least for this season. So that would be my one qualm with the idea of taking 2 linebackers. Is just like, how does it all fit? And does Burks just play over Carter and Carter's just a special teamer? That's a very likely scenario. So I think it does address a little bit of the Ravens' rushing attack, though. And their pass game attack, too, because a lot of the Mark Andrews stuff goes over the middle of the field. You want to find guys that can move, run, and be able to keep up there.
Yeah, so Knight should give you some of that, at least, even if Carter maybe is a hair short on that side. All right.
Yep.
Always great talking football with you, Mike. Tell folks where they can find your material online.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Bengals_Sands. If you don't use that for whatever reason, you can find me. Really, I just do the writing now. So SI, it would be Bengals Talk SI, and find it there.
All right. No podcast for you now, Mike?
No, Odyssey didn't want to continue it any longer. So now I'm a free agent, just doing other shows.
All right. Good for you. Other folks out there would love to hear your ideas for film study shorts. I've had about 4 or 5 come in the last 2 weeks that have been outstanding. More are appreciated. This is the off season. I'm still trying to produce 5 or 6 shows per week. That requires some fan involvement. And I want to talk about what makes you passionate with regard to the Ravens. And the thinner the topic, the better. So be as kind of specific as you can, something we can do in 20 minutes or 30 minutes maybe, but not hopefully something that will require 4 1-hour shows. We can do that kind of thing. A really well thought out series of shows like that is always welcome. But I'm really looking for the people who just want to talk for 20 minutes about something that they're either angry about or they're very passionate about. Mike, thanks again for joining me.
Yep, and thanks for having me.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.